It's our second Biodiversity Network seminar this term. And we're delighted to welcome Dr. Sue Roberts, who is the Green Party Councillor at South Oxfordshire District, and also founder and chair of Bioabundance, which is a community interest company. And Sue is here to provide insights on how the financialization of housing allows development to gobble up our land. I'll let you take over, Sue.
Thank you. The boy drew back his bow and let his arrow fly up into the black cloud. The cloud of crows stretched to the horizon, blocking out the sun. He knew he must hit one. But as his arrow approached, a small gap appeared and the arrow shot through. Fine, he thought, I'm bound to catch a bird on the way down. But another small circle of blue opened up and his arrow fell to the ground. The old man telling me this was 10 in 1950. He had been that boy. Such was the bioabundance of animals in those days. Roll on. Right, share screen. All right. Roll on 30 years, and I was studying wild rabbits for my Oxford University doctorate. I chose rabbits because they were plentiful and easy to watch. Not so now. Now they are on the red list for endangered species. The size of the catastrophic decline in nature depends on your starting point. This watch list indicator shows an 80% drop in the size of key species populations in the UK from 1970 to 2010. But go back to an earlier starting point and the decline will be even greater. Why does this even matter? What has nature ever done for us? What has it done, aside from providing clean air, clean water, flood control, the breaking down of waste, local climate control, shade, and tranquility of mind? Well, there is food, there are the pollinators. We are so close to losing our insects. Without pollinators, there would be no fruit and very few vegetables. We would have the wind-pollinated grains. There would be bread, but man cannot live by bread alone. Losing the insects, a vital element of our ecosystem, would be like taking out the crucial supporting block from a Jenga tower. The whole edifice would collapse, which would be fatal to us. We must work fast and furiously to recover nature, but by how much? The UK government talks variously of no net loss, a better state, or even 10% gain, but against which depleted baseline? Oxfordshire, of all the counties in the southeast outside London, has the worst access for people to wild spaces, a poor baseline. Would 10% net gain on the rubble-denuded chalk hills be adequate? Sorry, on the rubble of a soil-denuded chalk hill be adequate? Nothing will come of nothing, and 10% of nothing is nothing. The goal should not be relative to the current state of nature. It should be an absolute. Bioabundance Community Interest Company, which I chair, has set a goal for us to restore nature to its best state since 1950, when the so-called greening revolution started to pour chemicals on our land. Meanwhile, there is a destructive rush to build upon our land for financial gain. Once land has been concreted over, it cannot be restored for nature or used for regenerative farming. Each new town or road bisects a landscape, creating barriers where previously wildlife could flow. Creatures are forced into smaller and smaller islands. As the islands become too small, the new tiny populations become unviable and are quickly extinguished. In South Oxfordshire, there is a plan to build 32,000 houses between 2011 and 2035. That is a 50% increase in housing over what we had. And yet, over this period, the Office for National Statistics projects that a mere 8,000 new households will form. So 4 dwellings are to be built for each one that can become a home. And necessarily, 24,000 newly empty homes will be created. It need not be the new homes that lie empty. It might be the Oxford mansions and the chocolate box Chiltern villages that empty out. They are bought up by the global wealthy as second, third, fourth homes, or left empty as money boxes. This overdevelopment plan was inherited from a conservative South Oxfordshire council by the Greens and Lib Dems, who were voted in by the people to scrap the plan. We were forced to continue with this same plan and adopt it by Robert Jenrick, the Conservative Government Minister for Housing. Bioabundance challenged the adoption process in the planning court last Thursday. It's the planning court of the High Court. We challenged on grounds of democracy. The adoption vote by councillors was not unfettered and fair. And on grounds of climate change mitigation. Mitigation was not properly taken into account when balanced against economic growth. Our case was thrown out. We intend to appeal. Crucially, development plans are supposed to mitigate climate change, but planners and governments' idea of mitigation appear to differ from the IPCC definition. Mitigation of climate change should mean reducing greenhouse gases. Government takes it to mean increasing greenhouse gases, but by not so much as you might otherwise have done. This final recourse in the courts will not be open to citizens in the future, as the government intends to end the right to judicial review. This plan will see terrible climate effects and increased collapse of nature, whilst producing homes that do not solve the housing crisis. Christchurch, Magdalen, Thames Water and Oxford City Council all joined the action against bioabundance to defend their patches for the riches that they will bring. I would urge members of these colleges and the other rapacious, profit-oriented ones, St John's and Brasenose spring to mind, to challenge them. You have a responsibility as custodians of our land to bring back a safe, natural world and help us reach zero carbon. All this is not to minimize the acute affordability crisis. That is caused by low interest rates, low salaries and benefits, and other unfortunate macroeconomic factors. The simplistic demand-supply model does not apply. House prices do not come down with more houses built. This huge development of flats at Battersea Power Station was under construction down the road from where my son lived in a vermin-infested, damp basement shared with other professionals. I suggested he look at buying a studio flat there, but the prices started at an eye-watering 1.3 million. Even if he were on another planet where he could have afforded this, he would not have got a look in. The first tranche of 1,500 flats was sold overnight via Singapore. They were not advertised in England. So how could we use our existing homes better? In Oxfordshire, 3/4 of homes have at least one, and more usually 2 or more, spare bedrooms. Overcrowded homes where people inappropriately share bedrooms are rare. There is more housing per person in this country than there has ever been. The financialisation of housing is a problem here. 80% of lending is for housing, and our casino capitalism depends on this single asset class. Remarkably, in national accounting, owner-occupiers are deemed to be paying rent to themselves, and this imaginary financial transaction is added to GDP. As house prices rise, so does our deemed rent, bolstering GDP. House prices could be stabilised by restricting the buying of homes to those who live in the area, as in New Zealand and India. Or homes could be sold only for residential purposes, as in St Ives, Cornwall, reducing the second home ownership problem that prices locals out of their right to shelter. But that would not serve GDP growth. Where does it all end? The South Oxfordshire local plan was spawned from the Oxfordshire Strategic Housing Market Assessment of 2014, which prescribed the building of 100,000 homes for Oxfordshire between 2011 and 2031, well in excess of need, said Dominic Raab, the then housing minister. And there it stops? Unfortunately, no. I served for a year on the Oxfordshire 2050 plan making group. By boring people to death, I managed to swerve the vision toward one of nature first, a beautiful green vision. The same has been created for the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. 1 million houses are to be built between Oxford and Cambridge by 2050. A tiny fraction of that number would house our growing population. What the industrialisation of the area may do is create the Silicon Valley dream of its proponents, a government dream channeled through the local enterprise partnerships. But what it cannot do is restore nature and zero our carbon emissions. At this point, I'm usually asked 3 questions. Why would developers build homes they cannot sell? There is an insatiable, almost infinite, international market for homes, unrelated to local need. Developers can sell homes even if they are to remain empty. The second question is, if this is too many homes, they will not be built. So what is the problem? Here, I must let you into a secret and describe to you a very little understood aspect of current planning law in the UK. Local councils set a target number of homes that must be built. The 5-year housing land supply rule says that if it cannot be proved that 5 years worth of houses are in train to be built, if at any one time there are not spades in the ground for housing going forward 5 years, then the council has failed the test. The phrase land supply has been snuck into this rule so that people wrongly believe that the failure is due to insufficient land having been allocated to housing. It is not. In South Oxfordshire, land for a 40% higher housing number than our already extreme target has been allocated as a buffer. And yet already we teeter on the edge of failing the supply rule. The moment housing drops below that limit, developers can grab yet more land. To be clear, if developers fail to build, they themselves can insist on being allocated more land for housing. A win-win for developers, a lose-lose for you, the citizen, and for us on this earth. This clause is one of many abominations in the Mickey Mouse planning guidance, the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, with which the Conservatives replaced decades of planning law and precedent. Last month, Cherwell's housing land supply fell below 5 years. That's the 4th district outside Oxford. And Savills, the land agent, had a full-page advert in the Oxford Mail to alert buyers to the fact that speculative land grabs could restart. The vultures are circling. The third question is, won't the homes be filled with people coming from London? It must be understood that all parts of our country are being told to build houses far in excess of need. Government wants 300,000 new houses every year, but only half that number of households are likely to form. Necessarily, for every 2 new dwellings built in England, 1 new empty home is created. So yes, people might come from London, but then who will fill the emptying out homes there? It is not only nature that suffers from unneeded development, it is also the climate. 100 tons of CO2 are released just during the construction of the average home and its share of the supporting facilities. As developers have prevented zero carbon homes from being mandated, as they were to have been in 2016, we still have homes being built that will ooze out 5 tons of CO2 per annum for their whole lives. These add to the 27 million homes that need eco-fitting to reduce carbon emissions. There is no plan for how this will be done. We should be building the number of homes we need, not the number of homes the market can absorb. We should always plan first for nature, which is fragile and essential. Professor Lawton's 2010 government report, Making Space for Nature, makes it clear that before anything, we must plan for the restoration of nature at a landscape scale. The focus in Britain now is on protecting nature through natural capital accounting, most notably brought forward in the review by Professor Dasgupta. Monetizing the value of nature in terms of natural capital and ecosystem services is good and bad. I learned a lot from courses Dieter Helm and Cameron Hepburn ran here in this department. Does it make us protect nature or exploit its value for financial gain? As I see it, there are 3 ways that natural capital attracts finance or investment, as it is known. 1, direct investment in nature to protect the interests of the investor, where nature is providing clear services. For example, insurance companies might invest in wetlands to reduce flooding. 2, offsetting, sacrificing areas for development and making up for the nature losses with a payout by developers for the enhancement or protection of natural areas in other places. 3, direct exploitation, managing land to produce goods such as food and wood or for tourism and entertainment. The architecture for managing natural capital and offsetting is to be through local nature partnerships. We are setting one up in Oxfordshire. It will be dominated by business and development interests, with only 1 or 2 seats on the board for nature groups. There will be a seat for Oxford University. Could we ensure that that is held by an ecologist and not a financier? Even our nature groups and our universities are hamstrung by their financial dependencies. People from both sectors have been unwilling to become full members of Bioabundance, for example, lest government spot their engagement with prosecutors of the government and pull their funding. Local nature partnerships will work together across the Oxford-Cambridge arc to manage its industrialisation. Money for nature and carbon sequestration will flow as offsetting funds from the building of the 1 million unneeded houses. But let us not kid ourselves, nature cannot be moved. The best way is not to trash it in the first place. Financial valuation of natural capital is a dubious protection. Nature's value across the Oxcam arc is priced at £3 billion. That is a drop in the ocean compared with the profits from 1 million homes, say 200 billion if each sold for 200,000. It is time we stood back from the commercialisation of everything. Government should be taking responsibility for the restoration of swathes of land for nature. This should not be left to the market. How far will government step in to see that natural capital accounting does not lead to asset stripping our countryside? We still have the tension between public good and the juggernaut of capitalist dogma, blind to anything but the principle of maximising profit, and smug in its assumption that the invisible hand of the market will magically make everything right. The house-building finance complex, as Bob Colnut calls it, is a global problem, and the financialisation of our natural world is a two-edged sword. I just want to share a couple more slides with you. Cambridge is well ahead of Oxfordshire. The direct exploitation of nature is already underway. Investors have rushed in to convert water meadows where cows once grazed into a municipal park with plastic cows. Financiers are particularly keen on nature areas maintained by volunteers, which will be more profitable. How can we promote nature and regenerative farming and stop unneeded urbanisation? Protecting, extending and enriching existing natural landscapes is one way. Bioabundance is proposing a new national park northeast of Oxford, incorporating Otmoor and the ancient forests of Burnwood and Stowood. Now that government has scrapped the idea of an unneeded motorway between Oxford and Cambridge, the park could be extended northwards to the Upper Ray wetlands and the Brill Hills. Oxford City Council is in favour of considering such a park, and Natural England are interested as well. Bioabundance is an extensive group of ecologists, planners, lawyers, and enthusiasts for nature. We would welcome you at www.bioabundance.org.uk. That's it, folks.
Thank you, Sue. That's amazing. Thank you so much for this insightful talk. I'm going to open the floor. Does anyone have any questions for Sue? I have lots, so I'll just let you talk first. Please put your camera on if you can. It's always lovely to see you guys. Olivia said she particularly loved the poetic start. I loved it too. It's a great way to launch. Do you have questions?
Hello.
Peggy.
Yes. How can we make it easier for small groups all around, say, the rim of Oxford? And when a small group is battling, I'm part of one of those. It's the fields, 2 fields at Iffley. We have a wonderful organization there called Friends of the Fields Iffley. And one of the things that we're doing, which is natural and which many people are doing, is joining with all the other small groups. So one massive organizations of which all of the small groups all over the country could join to get together and add all of their acreage and say, this is the amount of acreage that all over the country we are fighting together in small groups. How can we facilitate that?
There are umbrella groups. There's one called Stop Urban Sprawl that we're considering how we can interact with. It's very difficult. There's also the Not the Expressway group, which now that we've got rid of the expressway, is essentially not the overdevelopment of the Oxford-Cambridge ARC group. One of the things and Bioabundance itself, we consider our unique selling point, if you like, to be our access to pro bono lawyers, which of course we would like to share with everybody who's doing this sort of work. And so do join us for a start, Peggy. And then it's really difficult to manage a group like this of volunteers, and we have sort of split off into smaller groups that are working on specific things, and one of those is a mapping exercise. And the way that we were doing mapping for two reasons. One is to map out the sites that are being exploited in the South Oxfordshire plan and work out who owns them, and that is why Christchurch and Magdalen are of particular interest to us. And then to ask students and staff who belong to those colleges to seize hold of the colleges that they're responsible for and to stop this exploitation of our land. So that's one reason for the mapping exercise. The other thing that we do, we've got members who are involved with the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and they've got land use satellite imagery going back to the 1990s. So we're trying to do a mapping exercise which shows how the industrialisation has gone forward since the 1990s in quite small amounts as the organic growth of Oxfordshire has occurred. And then we would zoom it forwards to show how the non-organic, ridiculous expansionist policies will change the face of Oxfordshire in the future.
I was thinking more, Sue, of being part of a large group, say like Greenpeace, where there is a whole section where we could foment something that has just a couple of principles. What you're talking about at this level is advanced interest. And once you mention hydrology and floodplains and things, but if you mention, people's air, I was talking to somebody outside the gate here, and I'm only chattering on because nobody else has offered to speak. I was talking to someone at the gate of the field that we are going to save. And I said, how about signing a petition? And he said, oh, well, I don't live here. I said, well, yes, you do. You've just breathed some of the oxygen that this field makes. And so you're part of Oxford now, and you have breathed out some CO2 in our patch. And just some simple things that people can do, even if it's just joining petitions, because that's what most people want to do. They want an easy life.
I think you're right. They need to be using
and from there they move on another step ahead at their own level.
Yeah,
you are way ahead of so many of us, and I really appreciate that.
And I can't get this message out, Peggy. So for the last 10 years, I'm a member of Greenpeace, and every year or so, they put out a questionnaire saying, what would you like us to focus on? And I always have to add another box and say overdevelopment, unneeded housing. I was canvassing a couple of days ago, and somebody said to me, well, why don't we know anything about this, that this is overdevelopment? Why do we not know that these houses are not needed? Why does even the Green Party say that we need to build 3 million houses? We simply don't. But of course, the message doesn't get out. You listen on the radio and they have a program about housing, and nobody says we don't need this housing. Nobody says that because nobody has looked at the ONS projections and seen that we can't fill those houses. So somehow we just have to get this message out. But we've got the whole weight of the house building finance complex sitting on top of us. The main lobbyists of MPs in Parliament are developers because that's the main source of our economy. So we've got to scotch these myths, and then we can start sort of working on it. And the other thing is we've got to change the government. The lovely Robert Jenrick yesterday I heard that he's just approved a plan for 675 houses in Kent that had gone to appeal. So the council had turned it down. The developers go to appeal, and they can carry on doing that because they've got infinite money bags. Have gone to appeal. The inspector has said, yes, 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 that's fine to build on best and most versatile agricultural land with sensitive ecological sites on it. That's absolutely fine. But the inspector said, you should be taking extra mitigation measures for energy efficiency and to stop carbon emissions from your new house building. Robert Jenrick said, well done, Inspector. I approve what you've said. You work for me, and we will have the 675 houses, but it is not necessary or reasonable to impose extra restrictions on the developers, and we will not have the carbon measures that the council wanted to put in. So we've got to get rid of these
Criminals.
Money criminals, that's the word. These money-oriented people. Actually, it's not even our money that we're talking about, is it?
There's your mantra. Follow the money. Just
Follow
tell
the
anybody
money.
follow the money.
Yeah, so we need an awful lot of money, and we've got an awful lot of money. There's lots of rich people who don't want to see the houses built, but they don't know that it's moral to say that because they don't know that we don't need the housing. And so horribly in South Oxfordshire, we are having to put out, these are people who normally vote Conservative, who have started writing, stop the concreting Conservatives, but they're also having to stop the concreting Labour people, because if you look at Oxford City Council, which is dominated by Labour, they have a very simplistic view of it. They can see that they've got abominable housing conditions for some of their people, and they think that the way out of this is to build houses, and it isn't. And this is where we need the system change that everybody is talking about. Well, all the green people are talking about. We need absolute fundamental system change, and it actually means we've got to live in a different way. But mostly it has to be the fact. Are you going to do a little concert for us, Peggy?
No, I'm changing strings.
Okay.
Oh, that would be lovely. Sue and Peggy, I just wanted to mention that we just got funding this week to start a program through Oxford Martin School looking at healthy ecosystem restoration Oxfordshire. And we've been exploring the role that university can play to make it happen. So we'd like to continue talking about this with you, Sue. And we're working with a number of organizations across Oxfordshire to see how we can maximize the potential for demonstration. It's demonstration and research, so it's really focusing on the research and the methodologies we would use for ecosystem restoration, but it's I think it's very aligned with the work you're doing.
Yes, and so we're still waiting. So when I became a councillor, actually, and before that, when I've been arguing against the local plan in previous times, I have always said you have to place nature first. You have to work out where nature needs to go in order for it to become viable, and then you could plot the houses in the places where it's not going to interrupt nature. And that has sort of been taken on because the government now talks about local nature recovery networks. But horrible terminology is sometimes used, like corridors, which is not a corridor, is not a swathe. It's not a Professor Lawton swathe, or even stepping stones. And I looked at a map of our area that was created 5 years ago now, which some consultants had drawn in where the nature corridors and stepping stones were. And all of the roads, whether or not they had green verges and trees, all of the roads were drawn in as green lines, as if hedgehogs could just sort of walk down the road and connect themselves in that way. Local nature recovery networks, we are talking about inside, the Thames Valley Record Centre are the people who are coordinating the work, and they are doing that for Oxfordshire. But we cannot finalise the nature recovery networks until the Environment Bill is passed, because the Environment Bill specifies those nature recovery networks in it. And that keeps being kicked down the road. obviously, because it's going to interrupt or interfere with development and exploitation of our land.
Evelyn?
Sue, how do we spread this message, this valuable message that we are hearing from you? How do we dissipate it? And do you have any packs, information packs that have a distillation of these numbers in, so that we can shed light on the current situation and counter the mantra which says we need affordable homes?
The only packs we got at the moment is the TEDx that I did for Wallingford TEDx. I wonder if I can get that one. I'll just get the link and put it in the chat box. And that talks about the 32,000 houses and all that and sort of exemplifies it for Wallingford. From the South Oxfordshire experience. And the other thing is my blog. I can put my blog in here. I know how to do that. Which goes through the numbers again and again and again. I've stopped using it because I can only focus on one thing at a time. So it's about a year old now. But that talks a lot about the 100,000 houses for Oxfordshire and how that doesn't match the ONS, the Office for National Statistics data. So I'll put that in first. You're muted.
Sorry, it would be great to have some mapping tools for Oxford, say, so that, because visual information, I feel, gets through so much more easily.
Absolutely.
Statistics, and that we can show with time lapse what's been happening, what's left, make the case for needing to save it, and also showing that there are places to put homes that don't have that put nature first. So I wonder, is there any way of tapping into your mapping project with this?
Could you join Bioabundance, please? and you can join the mapping group, and then we can all work together on it. We've got the difficulty that obviously everybody is volunteers. We haven't got an organisation that's got any paid workers, and our main focus was, that's my TEDx thing. The main focus was this court case. If we had, it was really, really frustrating. The Climate Change Act is not strong enough to stop this sort of thing going on. And actually the legal framework is in the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004, as amended in 2008. And that is the one that says that development must mitigate climate change. I just cannot understand yet that the latest version of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework that I was talking about, has got in not only that you should mitigate climate change, it's actually got that it should plan for radical reductions in greenhouse gases. I think it's paragraph 148 or something like that. Radical reduction in greenhouse gases, and yet they still build houses. How can you radically reduce when each time you build a house, you immediately release 100 tons of carbon dioxide? So how can we put pressure on national government, says T. Wells to everyone? Through your MP, I suppose, is the way that we're meant to do it. John Howell, according to Bob Colnut, who wrote a book called The Property Lobby, John Howell is the MP for Henley. It's where Boris Johnson used to be MP. And he was the one who set up the precursor to the group that created the National Planning Policy Framework. The four people who created the NPPF, which is our whole planning law now, were Taylor Wimpey, I think it was, one of the developers, a councillor who was famous for having said, "I hate planners," a consultant who was very pro-development, and RSPB. But RSPB are in a situation that we're all in. You know, some of us are pretty cross with the nature groups who have welcomed the Oxford-Cambridge Arc, because they've been told that swathes of nature can be restored along it, and there'll be all this offsetting money available to them. It's just wrong. You know, it can't work like that. Offsetting shouldn't even be a concept, should it? We should be doing the right thing in the first place, plus doing whatever restoration that the offsetting money would have provided.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to my question there, Sue. I've been following your progress through South Oxfordshire with great interest, and my own woes about the Tory government and Jenrick in particular. But I wondered what your views were on the National Infrastructure Commission, which is one of these kind of government appointed quangos that none of us knows anything about much, but seems to be made up of very, very influential, great and the good people who have terrific sway over developments such as the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. Is there any way we can actually, that's what I mean by national pressure on national governments, anything we can do? Because as we found in our Friends of the Fields IFLI campaign, people unfortunately only tend to react to things too late because they can't get a grip on everything. There's so much, and they didn't realize it was going to happen there. So,
and they also think, because they don't really understand about planning, it's the last thing I wanted to get involved in. It's so dull. They also just don't know until the houses start popping up, and then it's far too late. You can't undo the plans. This is why I was so keen to get South Oxfordshire's plan thrown out, because once that land is allocated, it cannot be unallocated. It is condemned forever. And whenever there's a chance that they might lose their planning permission, they quickly go in and bulldoze whatever life was in there. The local enterprise partnership. What's your first name, Miss Wells?
It's Troth, T-R-O-T-H.
Okay. The local enterprise partnerships are other quangos. So they were created by this Conservative government. And they've got a direct line into government, into cabinet. And I was for nearly 2 years on the board of OXLEP, of Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. As a board member, there were 20 of us, we just sat there and smiled and nodded while the executive did everything that the executive did. We had absolutely no influence, absolutely no influence. I think that's how companies work. The local enterprise partnerships are private companies now. They've all been, they all had to incorporate themselves as such. The board, so once a quarter, we were presented with these massive long documents full of stuff that none of us could follow. I mean, I couldn't follow anyway. And then we'd find that what they had done was produce, and these were the seminal papers that are behind some of this. Originally, it was the Strategic Economic Plan. I think that's what S stood for. And now it is the Local Industrial Strategy. The SEP was the one that said we would have 85,000 new jobs in Oxfordshire. And for 85,000 new jobs, you needed 100,000 new homes, which was bizarre. And now what government is requiring with this local industrialisation strategy, they say, forget levelling up. They say Oxfordshire produces a lot of money for the Treasury. Apparently, we're one of 3 net contributors to the Treasury. Actually, we have been told that time and again by OXLEP, but I don't think it's actually true. And government says, you're producing high GVA. GVA is GDP, fiddled about a bit. You're producing a high GVA. We want you to double your GVA by 2050. And that would be even more money for our coffers. Now, as we know, if 80% of lending is for housing, this is where the money is coming from. It's selling our land to foreign interests. And that's where the money comes in. And then the swapping of houses, that all adds to GVA, doesn't it? Every time you buy or sell a house. And now this deemed rent as well that you're paying to yourself. So there's quite a lot to unravel, Troth, and I don't know how you do that other than kicking out the Tories, worrying about Labour, voting Green, which is now becoming a real thing, at least at the local level. Of course, we can never get in without proportional representation. And meanwhile, the government is closing down discussion and turning us into a one-party state.
I think I was going to suggest maybe that Biodiversity Network and Bioabundance and all of us need to flag up consultations that are upcoming to get everybody involved at the earliest stage. All those of us who've become aware through the latest series of developments and things, we need to capture that energy and ensure, because the government isn't going to do anything unless we actually actively engage with it in the way it says it has to be engaged with, if you see what I mean.
Truth, we do that. I mean, okay, yeah, we could share more and do more. There's Need Not Greed Oxfordshire. I don't know whether you're aware of that. That's a really good bunch of people. So early on, finding that none of the other groups were interested in housing except the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. My husband and I engaged with them, and he's becoming the chair of the Oxfordshire group shortly. And CPRE itself, because again, you know, it's got some constraints from government, it's set up this other group called Need Not Greed. And they've been a very good umbrella group. In fact, Bioabundance must become a member of it. We were trying to get them to become a member of us. It's difficult, you know. How many groups do people want to engage with? I was talking to Carlin and Cecil earlier about how great Zoom meetings are. And they were saying, yeah, but then you end up with back-to-back Zoom meetings, and all that we do is engage in all these multifarious things. It's really difficult to be actually effective, isn't it? That's why challenging in the courts was quite a good thing. That's the first time we've got national coverage about this issue at all in The Guardian. So, but as I say, judicial reviews are likely to be stopped because it doesn't fit the one-party state aim. Anyway, all go out tomorrow and vote Green, won't you? Or Lib Dem. They're another group that aren't, well, certainly in South Oxfordshire, we've fallen together to oppose overdevelopment. So it's beginning to become a thing. At least South Oxfordshire knows about it. And Oxfordshire knows about it. It's just not a very, I don't know, we need a champion. We need a champion that government listens to. Boris Johnson, for instance. I remember Cameron saying, when he started up this overdevelopment thing, saying, even in Ensham, there was going to, wherever he lived, there was going to be loads of development. And he said, we must all take the pain. But meanwhile, I had read an article in the Washington Post, or one of those, might be in the New York Journal, that said that was an editorial pleading with our government, with Cameron, to relax the planning laws, which had already been relaxed, so that national investment could take place. So that we were being dictated to by America, saying that we need to relax our planning laws so that they can buy up our land. And that's all happened. And then we've had this massive relaxation with the MPPF, which is terrible. It's got in it a clause which is that there should always be a presumption towards development. So it's actually a presumption towards sustainable development, but then they don't define sustainable. And sustainable can mean, sustainable is on three planks, and one of the planks is economic. So provided you're providing jobs. In fact, there was one that was nearly thrown out because there were no jobs in the area that these buildings were being built. And perversely, the inspector said, but there are jobs, there are the people who are building the houses. That is the jobs, that is the economic activity that will take place in that place. And what a circular argument is that? And we need those builders. We need those builders for this retrofitting of 27 million houses. They shouldn't be wasting their time going out there and building new houses that we don't need and that aren't carbon zero. They should be retraining, reskilling, and coming in and doing this incredibly difficult, bespoke retrofit work that every single house needs. I was a domestic energy advisor, so I would go around to people's houses, do an energy performance certificate assessment, and then advise them on how best to retrofit their homes for energy efficiency. our own house, just in terms of the extra energy efficiency things that we put in, those bits, just a little bit, the extra bit of insulation over and above what we would have had to put in anyway, was £60,000. When you include all the plastering and things that take place, it was much, much more than that. And sorry, I'm going off on a completely different thing. Let's go back to what we were talking about.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, does Jasper have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question, which is you talk about the financialization of housing as one of these big drivers of development, and I'm just wondering, to what extent is this something, how do we grapple with that problem, particularly the linking of housing to GDP and also foreign investment? Is this bigger than kind of individuals? Is this bigger than governments even? Because that's financialization of housing is a problem that's like all over the world. It's kind of embedded into the kind of international system. So how do we grapple with that problem? And are there alternatives that you've seen in other countries that might be models for doing something differently?
Yes, we went to New Zealand. A friend of ours had just emigrated there, and we don't go to New Zealand anymore because we don't fly anymore. But and he had bought a house just in time because 5 minutes later, the wonderful Fiona Ardern had banned any non-resident from buying homes in New Zealand. So Auckland was going through the roof. There was a lot of Chinese buying up of land there. And that has stabilized the prices in Auckland. It's the only way. I mean, that's what housing is supposed to be for, is for local people to live in. And that's what we have to do. Then at least we would limit it to the people of Great Britain. This would be impossible to achieve because we're so globalized, particularly in this country. But COVID has shown us that we can start to separate ourselves off eventually, and so that's one thing. But distracting telephones. Good, it stopped. And the other thing is about making housing affordable to live in, and how do we go back to a rental model and not making it so terribly important that you own your own house? I've got 3 children. It is terribly important to me that they should all own a house because I want them to be safe in the future and not be subject to the scary rental market, which is so unregulated. So we should have rent caps. Labour talk about rent caps. But none of these things can we bring in at a local level. But that's what should be happening, is rent caps and security of tenure, so that you know that so that you can make something a home like they do in Holland and Germany and places like that, and not think that you might be turfed out tomorrow. So that helps. And then the other thing that we have is, and this is one of the things that the low interest rates have forced us towards, is people like me in my big 4-bedroomed house, and my children have left. I am not going to take my money out of this house and put it into the bank where it will lose value. The only safe place to put your money is in housing, because interest rates don't exist anymore. And I don't know a way out of that. So I think the only way we can tackle it is to start taking away the global perspective. Oh, I know, it's universal basic income, it's proper pensions, it's social care properly funded, and then I wouldn't need to cling on to my house in order to fund my time in my nursing home. So there's quite a lot of social change that needs to take place. And I don't know, have you got any other suggestions? Yeah.
No, it's a tricky one.
But that's it. That's what climate change and the collapse of the natural world mean. We're facing the end of times, aren't we? And if we don't grasp the nettle and turn everything on its head and have a universal basic income where everybody is safe, and then nobody has to do this mucking about, and stop billionaires existing. Nobody needs more than £100,000, really, do they, in their bank account? Well, they shouldn't.
I'll ask if anyone else has a question. And otherwise, Sue, thank you so much for this great seminar. I loved it. And I would suggest one thing we can do with the new Healthy Ecosystem Restoration Oxfordshire Hero program is that we are running a series of workshops. So I'd suggest possibly you could work with us to run a workshop around this and to contact, as we were talking about, contacting local organizations that do work on this. So one we didn't mention at all is low carbon North Oxford or low carbon South Oxford. They're very involved, I'm sure. So getting organizations like this together, and we're also working with Rewilding UK, Rewilding Britain, and help me out, Carlin. We have so many organizations in Hero. We have oh well, I'll send you a list, but you can help us get involved and
if we could push forward this idea of a national park for Oxford. It's an amazing idea. This is one of our members at Bioabundance. He used to be a planner in Oxford City, and he's an ecologist, Ollie de Soissons. And he's been working with David Rogers, who's I think an alumnus professor from the zoology department, to propose this park. It will give access for 300,000 people, very close access. They could come in by train or bike or walk into this park. And then we can really sort of create a reservoir for Oxfordshire at that point. And then the nature recovery networks can sort of spill out of that and hopefully start to restore things around the county. What would have been lovely, what will be lovely, is if we really worked on the COP26 thing, and it seems to be the government is trying to push ideas forward to make themselves look good at COP26. And if we can actually cause something like this to happen or to be agreed in time, highly unlikely, but if we can actually push that forward, that would be really good.
So Rebecca Wrigley at Rewilding Britain has also been looking into Oatmore and working around there. I should put you in touch.
Yes, please.
And I think B-Boat have also been working a lot around this at the moment. So I'll just put you in touch with everyone.
Yes, we do have some B-Boat members at Bioabundance, but again, they would not join as an actual specific group because people are so fearful. These are fearful times, actually. Yeah, anyway, let's be positive. Let's make some nature parks and some nature recovery networks and stop the house building finance complex somehow.
And see, well, and what we can do is see how we can work with university and with the colleges.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for coming.
Lovely to meet you.
We have, so Jasper, we have a series of seminars coming up, and Jasper's very involved in this on policy. Do you want to say a couple of words? We have 3 of them coming up in the next few weeks.
Sure. So starting on the 19th of May, we've got a 3-week series of discussion seminars, which are all around policy engagement and how academic researchers working in biodiversity related fields can kind of think about working with policymakers, connecting with them, attending policy events, doing submissions. As was mentioned, there's these inquiries and that Parliament does around particular topics. So how does academia engage with policymaking? And we'll explore that over 3 weeks from the 19th of May.
So please join us if you can. And everything is recorded and it'll be online. Caroline's already sent you the link. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you.